Ed, hi, I am Hannah Pescaru, and I have been studying body-focused repetitive behaviors, or BFRBs, for around 3 years now. And I guess one of the most common questions that people have asked me are, how did you get involved in BFRBs? I have never even heard of that. And that is a very valid point to make. I didn't know about BFRBs until I reached high school. So if you don't know, BFRBs, or body focused repetitive behaviors, are compulsive disorders in which someone repeatedly fidgets with their body, leaving physical damage. So this can be compulsive nail biting, skin picking, hair pulling. And I didn't realize this at the time, but I actually did grow up with a couple BFRBs, thinking that they were just bad habits that I'd grow out of, but I didn't, unfortunately. I felt very misunderstood by my family because they kept insisting I'd grow out of it. And then I learned in high school that these were actual complex disorders. On the other hand, there are still very novel points of discussion in the research world. Not a lot is known, like where do they come from? Can they be passed genetically? Is there a cure? So that is why I try to do the work I do. I try to just make others like me feel more understood, that they are not to be shamed or guilted because it's something that they cannot control. So, because this is super informal, if anyone has any questions for me, I'd love to answer them.
Okay, so while some people are thinking of some questions, could you please say on how research is really involved in BFRBs? Like, how do you break the stigma and how do you really research something that some people are having trouble believing in?
That's a great question, Rhea. Thank you for asking. So again, not much is known about BFRBs, so I can't really say, oh, BFRBs are this instead of bad habits. So instead, my research focuses more on the effects because a lot of people don't take them as seriously as they should. For example, my last research project covered BFRBs in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. BFRBs are known to grow worse under times of great anxiety or great stress. So I was wondering, well, this was a hard time for everyone. People with BFRBs are probably struggling even more with their disorders. And I did my research, I worked with other healthcare professionals, and I did find that yes, people with BFRBs were more likely to experience a worsening of their disorders. And by researching that and by explaining how, in a time where we all have to look out for each other, there's a population that is suffering under so much stigma as well. And by putting that message out, I really hope that people can see their own effects on other members of society. Like, oh, yeah, we are all suffering under a pandemic, but I am also contributing to a negative stigma by not taking these disorders seriously. So, by looking at the effects, I really feel like we can go back to the causes and help reduce some of that stigma. Great question.
Yeah, that's amazing. So another question that someone has is that you are very impressive with your BFRB journey and everything like that by having the youngest speaker to present at the International BFRB Con. So for anybody who's like interested in going in this field, how do you even get to this position? Like, what's the steps to be here?
Honestly, that's also a great question. And my honest answer would really be just figure out what you're interested in. I mean, I went into having to do so many things to make myself look better, but my heart wasn't in it. And I don't know, when I found an issue that I really connected with and I felt accepted when I was like working through it, I don't know, that kind of drove me to talk to more people, to research more things. It wasn't even like I was trying to pursue a specific position. It was more like I was trying to fulfill my own desire of helping other people because I know firsthand what that was like. So, my advice for anyone trying to pursue independent research or presentation speaking, don't try to do what someone else is doing because there's already someone doing that. You want to make your own name for yourself, find something you're interested in, and just do it to the best of your ability. Why are you passionate about that? And how can you put a different take on that issue? And just by being unique, by showing like a very unique passion for something, you'll get wherever you want to be. I think I also saw a question in the chat. Um, Hearing more about my own personal research, my personal research experiences. Everyone has been very understanding throughout my research. I'm still doing research, so I can't say that I've been, I don't know, super seasoned in that field. But this also relates back to my last question. People are willing to help you. You just have to be genuine. Again, don't try to do what someone else is doing because odds are the person you're reaching out to for help is helping 5 other students with that issue. Be unique, find something that you're truly passionate about, and people will be willing to help you. My research process has been super collaborative, and people have always made exceptions in a way. If it felt like my message didn't quite fit into what their vision was for their program or their journal, they would always give critiques for how I could better change my message, or they would point me in a better direction. They saw my message and they wanted to help me. My predestined helpers, they guided me in a different direction. So again, if you want to pursue independent research, cannot stress this enough, be truly passionate. People will help you, I promise.
Since you have published 3 journals and you're very like experienced in writing about BFRBs, how do you become unique with your writing on this topic? Since it can be a large topic and others also write about it, how do you add your own uniqueness to it?
That's a very good question and something that I still struggle with. I mean, I'm still young. I'm only a high school senior now. Ooh, I'm ready to start that year. So I still do have trouble remaining unique in my writing style and my writing topics. Again, the answer just lies back in your passion. If you're truly passionate about something, you're going to look things up and try to gather as much knowledge as you can. And in that process, you'll kind of see what's covered and what's not. For example, I've seen so many university professors studying like the neurological differences between normal patients and patients with the BFRB. They studied brain structure and found some differences there. So I know that as a high school senior with no access to an experimental lab, I couldn't really write about that. I couldn't really test it either. So try and be more philosophical in your approach. You don't have to find a cure for cancer necessarily, but wonder to yourself, how is affecting my life personally? How do I think I can spin a unique take? Be more specific. What kind of cancer are you looking into? You have to be really specific. Try to gather as much knowledge as you can, and those questions will start to come up, and you'll try to answer them yourself, and that's your research.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's a wonderful answer. Somebody asked in the chat, how are BFRBs different from OCD? Is there any overlap?
Yes, absolutely. There is an overlap. BFRBs are actually found to be under the umbrella of OCD. As I've studied, OCD also deals more with just thoughts in general, those invasive, intrusive thoughts that have the habit of controlling your life. BFRBs are more physical manifestations of that, you have to give in into those compulsions that controls your life at one point, and it is under the umbrella of OCD? That's a great question.
So for people who want to get into BFRB in specific regions within neuroscience, what is your best advice on people who want to go into these fields such as BFRB?
As I've said before, BFRB research is still very new. And because of that, I think it's a very unique opportunity to get involved. There are probably many people that you could reach out to, and they'll try to find a place for you. I'd recommend starting with TLC. TLC, or the Learning Center, it's the National Organization for BFRB Awareness and Research. And I've personally reached out to them because I've wanted to get involved, and they were almost always able to fit me in somewhere. Again, just figure out why you want to pursue neuroscience. I have friends who want to major in neuroscience just like I do, but they're interested in pursuing Alzheimer's research because they have an affected grandfather or something like that. They're just interested in, I don't know, brain tumors, anything like that. You have to narrow your focus. But if it's BFRBs, it's kind of an exception. We'll try and find a place, and you'll almost always find one. Just reach out to people and don't be afraid to spread your message.
Okay, someone has asked in the chat, how do people in this field of study conclude things about BFRB and its presentation in people, since people would respond to it so differently? Can experimental conclusions really be generalized across a large sample group?
That is a really great question. And there isn't a concrete answer because, again, research is so new. Obviously, people with trichotillomania or compulsive hair pulling will have different presentations of their BFRB than someone with compulsive nail biting. However, some generalizations can be made. For example, the neurological differences that I mentioned earlier. According to studies that I've read over, people with BFRBs were found to have a smaller amygdala, which processes pain. They had a greater level of connectivity between their orbitofrontal cortex and the basal ganglia, and this would mess up their brain's reward system, which means that anytime they would engage in their BFRB, they would kind of see that as a reward, a pretty damaging reward, but they'd feel satisfied. So while there are different presentations, it's still a compulsive disorder that causes you to harm yourself in a way. So those generalizations can be made.
It's a great answer, thank you. So like all fields in neuroscience, it's rapidly evolving. So how do you see the future of BFRB? Like, and then how do you see yourself play into it basically?
That's a great question, and one that I'm excited to answer. I know that there is a professor, Professor John Grant, that is currently affiliated with the University of Chicago, super close to my house. And he is spearheading a research program called BPM. And that is basically in charge of finding the genetic link in BFRBs and a potential cure for anyone with BFRB, which is very hard to imagine right now. So that is something that I definitely want to get involved with in the future. And yeah, science is evolving. Everything is really new, but I really hope that there's still a place for me in the future. And if you could repeat the first part of your question, I think I missed that. I heard the last part though.
Oh, it's basically on how BFRBs is evolving and how you think like how far a cure really is from where we are today.
Oh, I definitely think it's very far because we still don't know the exact causes. There are, I know that there is jewelry, there are bracelets on the market. They're actually really cool. I've seen them. They are programmed to vibrate against your wrist every time it's raised, and kind of it goes to your head, it goes to your face, and it starts vibrating. But that doesn't really stop the behavior. It just stops the manifestation and it stops the physical damage. I think a cure is pretty far away if we don't know the root cause of BFRB. But as I said, years later, I hope to get involved in a lab setting so I can hopefully be a part of the solution. Great question.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So as the previous question stated, like there is a similarity between BFRBs and OCD. So if a treatment comes out for one of them, do you think that there could be a potential fast track for BFRB since there is some overlap between the two disorders?
That's a great question, and one that I can't say for certain because I have not studied OCD as in depth as I have. But if it were up to me to make a guess, I would think that there could be some form of a fast track, as I know that some people with OCD have purely, they only have thoughts and internal compulsions. Some also have external compulsions, such as they have a very great desire to go, I don't know, touch a doorknob or get up and like do a spin, just as an example. Because of that, I think there could be a fast track because BFRBs are purely external. I mean, they are internal. You have your inner compulsions and your inner thoughts, but it's your, your physical presentation that causes you to be diagnosed with the BFRB. So I think that if there was a cure for BFRBs, that doesn't translate to a cure for OCD because it is a much bigger umbrella. But if there was a cure for OCD with external presentation, I think there could be a fast track for a BFRB cure. There's a bit of a lull in question, so I do also want to get out an important part of the message. If you think you or someone close to you has a BFRB, definitely look for the warning signs such as like physical marks or bald patches, but be very sensitive when bringing that up if it's a loved one. If it's yourself, get help. I promise you that there is someone willing to help you. They just want to understand if you actually have a BFRB. You might think it's just a bad habit, but it could honestly be deeper. Everyone has, occasional episodes of like they pull out their hair when they're stressed or they pick at a pimple on their face. But there is a point where it becomes clinically significant and interrupts your day to day life. And that is where you do need some help and you'd need to talk to someone if you're comfortable with that. And also, again, if you're sensitive to this issue, you don't have to listen to this. But I've had questions where people have asked me if BFRBs are a form of self harm. And that is not true. While BFRBs can leave you with physical damage, the intention is never to leave harm. The harm is often just an unfortunate consequence of someone fulfilling their desire to engage in the BFRB. Their intention isn't to cause harm to their bodies. So if you're worried that you'll be perceived as having an issue with self-harm, don't worry, it's okay. Your intention is not to harm yourself. It is just to get at those compulsions. So again, if you think you have a BFRB, stigma is getting much lower now, thankfully, so just reach out. And I saw I have another question. Can someone suddenly develop any kind of BFRBs later on in life? I wouldn't say it's suddenly, but the majority of people who have BFRBs develop them in adolescence. I personally, I grew up with one of my BFRBs, I would say my entire life. I guess it was something that I've always seen as a bad habit and then I've never really gotten over. While my other BFRB, I would say, developed when I was 13. That was a very gradual process, though. I can't speak for everyone. There might be people who suddenly develop it, but yes, it is certainly possible to develop it later in life. Some ways you can advocate for reducing the stigma surrounding BFRBs. That is a great question, and I am so glad someone asked that. There are many ways you can advocate for, and honestly, I think the biggest recommendation is just being open to the research and understanding that this is an issue. Most people haven't even heard what BFRBs are. My parents sometimes still pronounce it as BRFBs or something like that. Just make sure you're knowledgeable about that issue and you can recognize the warning signs. Definitely go to the TLC website. There are plenty of opportunities there to learn more. There are also some support groups you can join. There are ways you can organize fundraising walks, and there are just ways to get involved in the BFRB community. Great question. Is it possible for someone to develop a BFRB at a younger age and grow out of it? That is a great question and one that I'm not sure I know the answer to because again, everyone is different. BFRBs last again much longer than bad habits because you can grow out of bad habits. I've heard of people having BFRBs for years and they just somehow gradually stop those compulsions. So I do believe it's possible to grow out of it, but BFRBs are much longer issues. And for all we know, with the kind of low number of research articles out there, someone can curb all of their compulsions, but still have problems with those compulsions. Like they can stop the physical presentation, but they still have those compulsions. And at that point, I'd still say they have a BFRB. So I don't really know the answer to that, but I hope I can research more and let you know.
So a couple more questions here before we tie up the fireside chat up. It's that since BFRB falls under such a large umbrella of other diseases and neurological things, is there like a definite test to test for if you have a BFRB, or if you think that someone does have a BFRB? Is there like a test that you can take that to know a definite answer?
Great question. Unfortunately, at this time, there is no definite test. It is really just up to the healthcare professional to deem how severe is the damage and how much does it impact your day-to-day life. I feel like that's why there is so much stigma, why there are so many undiagnosed people. It's because so many people are drawing the line between habit and disorder at different places. Someone can tell you that, yes, that's pretty bad. You might have a BFRB, and someone can tell you you'll grow out of it. But there is no definite test, and it's really up to you to determine, how much does it interfere with your life and how bad do you think the damage is?
So a question has come in the chat. When do we know that normal repetitive behaviors becomes a disorder?
That's a great question. And again, it's different for everyone because it's really up to you to determine what's normal and abnormal for yourself. Everyone, again, has that habit of picking at a spot. They, I don't know, over tweeze their eyebrows or something. But if they see some place where they left damage, most of the time they're just able to stop. You know that it's not normal when you leave damage. You could feel ashamed or guilty. You could be in physical pain, but you are still somehow not able to stop the urge from picking, pulling, fighting again. And it just becomes a cycle of leaving damage, you feel ashamed, and you can't stop. Most of the time, people can't stop, but you know it's abnormal when you have compulsions nearly constantly and you leave damage that you feel bad about, yet you can't prevent. Great question, though.
So while wrapping up on a more optimistic note, I guess, is there any way you can potentially help a BFRB patient or someone who is struggling with this with any like kind of treatment or some type of therapy or even like talking to them or say, like, is there anything that could potentially help them?
Yes, great question. I keep repeating myself, but again, this is different for everyone. What works for me and what I have seen works for my friends with BFRBs is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as just positive self-talk. I'll address the second part first, the positive self-talk. Make sure you have a supportive environment in your home or with your friends. Your family understands that this isn't something that you can control, and make sure that you understand that this is something you can't control. This disorder does not control your life. It does not run your day to day. You are more than your BFRB. And just because you have a bad episode here and there does not mean that that's all you are. There is also something called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is something that has personally helped me. This revolves around your triggers and then keeping the affected part of your body busy. I would say that therapies that involve just like straight up curbing the habit and the disorder do not help for me personally. For example, with nail biting, putting bad tasting nail polish on your nails has not personally helped for many people I know because I don't know, their compulsion is sometimes too strong and it overcomes that bad taste. However, if you realize your triggers, when do I feel most stressed? When do I feel most bored? Then you can realize, oh, now may be a good time to get my hands busy. Something that I've personally started doing is I've started embroidering and crocheting. Not very good at it yet, but when I realize, oh, I'm a little stressed, this could potentially lead to a bad episode, I just start embroidering whatever. So that is some way that you can help keep your hands busy or the affected part of your body busy, and just make sure you understand you are more than your BFRB. This episode will pass.
It's a great answer, and one that is very informative too. So as the chat is empty and nobody has any more questions, I think we can wrap up the fireside chat up. So thank you very much for coming out and giving this talk. I learned a lot about BFRBs. It's very interesting to learn about. So thank you for that. And as for everybody else, that wraps up this fireside chat. And for today, there are some other events like the office hours. So if you need it, please go and look at the schedule to attend that. But once again, thank you, Ms. Pescaru, for coming and giving this informative talk.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you everyone for coming. This is such an important issue and you never know who around you is struggling with one. So thank you for coming and just being more knowledgeable about it.